It's time for Tartarian Tales 20 and the surrender ceremony, which is very interesting because all their ceremonies and all their different processions and different things that they do that are like of commonplace, it seems, at the time, are all very fascinating because they have a lot of details about different people from all over the world and different customs, different jewels, different weapons. There's so many different kind of details that they always go over. So I try to pick ones that have some insight that I learned and that I had never thought of really before. So the surrender ceremony is a very interesting concept because there are all kinds of wars going on, and it's just a glimpse into one of their many ceremonies that were very official and very interesting. So let's see what happens here. I've got some imagery that will come later, a few little processions and ceremonies and from all over time. So we'll see. Enjoy. Here it goes. The surrender ceremony. It was nearly 1 in the afternoon when a bombard was fired, and at this signal the gates of the city were immediately thrown open. The first to appear were the guards that the king had placed in the city the day before, a special unit composed of 4,000 Siamese and Burmese troops, all arquebusiers, halberdiers, and pikemen, as well as 300 armed war elephants led by a Burmese captain named Mompakasir, who was the king's uncle and a Bainha of the city Melite in the kingdom of Chalui. 10 or 12 paces behind this elephant guard came many lords who had been sent by the king to receive him, including among them the following, and I'm going to butcher a lot of these. The Churka of Malakau, with another man next to him whose name I did not learn, both of them seated on elephants adorned with gold-plated harnesses and castles and collars of precious stones at their necks. Right behind these two, in the same order, came the Bainha Kendao, who was lord of Kazmim, an important city in the kingdom of Pegu, and the Mangibre Dakosem. After these two came the Bainha Braha, the Chamalakur, the Nahai Vagaru, the Ximen and Seda, the Ximen of Katao, the Ximen Guarem, son of the Mankamikau, king of Janguma, the Bainha of Lauraja Savadi, the Bainha Chake, governor of the kingdom, the Dambambu, lord of Mergu, Raja Savadi, brother of the king of Berdio, and Bainha Basoy, the Kauntan Hamerhido, the Monteo of Negrais, and the Cherka of Kulam. After these princes and many others whose names I did not hear, keeping a distance of 8 or 10 paces behind them, came the Rolim of Munay, the Talapoi with the highest priestly rank in the kingdom, who was revered as a saint by the king. He alone was at the side of the Chao Bainha, for he was acting as patron and intermediary between him and the king, and right behind him, borne on 3 litters, came the Nihai Kanato, daughter of the former king of Pegu, whose kingdom had been taken from him by this Burmese, and wife of the Chao Bainha, with her 4 little children, 2 boys and 2 girls, between the ages of 4 and 7. Around these litters came 30 or 40 very lovely young maidens of the nobility, walking with their heads bowed, weeping and completely exhausted, all leaning on other women for support. All of them were surrounded by a circle of telegrapos, who among them are like our Capuchin friars, all elderly men walking barefoot, their heads uncovered, praying on their beads, trying to lift the spirits of these ladies and reviving them with water whenever they swooned, which happened many times. It was indeed such a pitiful sight that there was not a man present at the scene who was not overwhelmed with pain and sorrow. Immediately behind this forlorn group came another guard corps of foot soldiers, and bringing up the rear were close to 500 Burmese on horseback. The Chabinha himself was seated on a small female elephant as a symbol of poverty and disdain for the world. In keeping with the precepts of the Holy Order, he was intending to join soon, with no other sign of pomp or splendor about him. He was dressed in mourning in a very long black velvet robe, with his head, beard, and eyebrows freshly shaven. Around his neck there was a frayed rope of coir, with which to surrender himself to the king, and the expression on his face was so sad that no one there could hold back the tears when they saw him. He was 62 years old, tall and handsome. His eyes were sad and tired, his features grave and severe, and he had the look of a generous prince about him. When he reached the courtyard inside the city gates, the entire population of women and children, and a few old men who were waiting for him there, on seeing what he looked like before he passed through, all let out such a loud scream 6 or 7 times that it sounded as if the world was coming to an end. This was followed by the sounds of loud wailing and lamentations, of people slapping themselves in the face and hitting their heads with stones so unmercifully that most of them were soon bathed in their own blood. As a result, the horror and pity of what was seen and heard there had such a mournful effect on everyone that even the Burmese of the guard, who were their enemies and stout-hearted by nature, were crying like babies. At this point, the Nahai Kanado, wife of the Chaubainha, fainted twice, along with all the other ladies around her, so that it became necessary to help him down from the elephant he was riding, for him to console her, and gave her courage to go on. But when he saw her lying on the ground looking as though she were dead, with their 4 children in her arms, he kneeled down on the ground and lifted his eyes to heaven. "O almighty power of the divine omnipotent God," he cried, the tears flowing freely, "who can fathom the righteousness of thy divine justice, that thou shouldst, without regard for the innocence of these poor creatures who have never sinned, allow thy wrath to go beyond the limits of our understanding? Nevertheless, Lord, my Lord, remember who thou art, and not who I am." And so saying, he collapsed face down on the ground beside his wife, which brought forth once more from that huge crowd of people who were there in countless number another outburst of weeping that was so horrible that I cannot find the words to describe the magnitude of it. However, when he came to, the Chaubainha asked for water, which he used to sprinkle on his wife, bringing her back to consciousness, and then cradling her in his arms, he remained with her that way for quite a while, speaking words of comfort to her, not in the manner of a heathen, which after all he was, but like a good Catholic man, endowed with deep understanding. After nearly half an hour had gone by this way, they mounted him on the elephant again, and the sad procession continued on its way, in the same order as before. As soon as the king passed through the city gates and started down the path formed by the foreign mercenaries, despite his state of mind, he raised his eyes and saw the 700 Portuguese soldiers who were stationed right next to the entrance, all dressed in their holiday best, with short leather cuirasses, the caps on their heads adorned with plumes, all of them with their arquebuses on their shoulders, and João Caeiro in their midst, dressed in crimson satin, with a gilded broadsword in his hands, clearing the way. The Chaubainha recognized him the moment he set eyes on him, and turning his face away, dropped forward on the elephant's neck, refusing to go a step further. "O brothers and friends of mine," he protested to those around him with tears in his eyes, "I assure you, in all truth, that I find it less painful and offensive to sacrifice myself in the manner that God in his justice has ordained, than to have to bear the sight of people as ungrateful and as evil as these Portuguese. Either let them kill me here, or else remove those people from there, for otherwise I will not go any further." And with that he turned around to avoid looking at us, and to let everyone see how offended he felt at us. All things considered, perhaps he had good reason for feeling that way, because of what I related above. When the captain of the guard saw that the Chaubainha had stopped in his tracks and heard his reason for refusing to go any further, though without being able to determine the reason why he was complaining about the Portuguese, he turned around very sharply on the elephant he was riding and came at João Caeiro. "Clear out of here," he shouted. "People as evil as you should not be allowed to tread the earth that may bear fruit. May God forgive whoever got it into the king's head that you could serve some useful purpose. Shave your beards off so that people will not be fooled by you, and you will serve us as women for our money." With growing anger, the Burmese guards began to threaten us, and much to our disgrace and shame, they drove us out of there, heaping words of abuse on us. And I must say, in all truth, that in my whole life, I never felt more aggrieved about anything than I did at that moment, for the honor of my countrymen. This done, the Chaubainha proceeded on his way until they reached the tent of the king, who was waiting for the Chaubainha with all the trappings of royal pomp and splendor, in the company of many lords, including 15 bainhas, who are like dukes, as well as 6 or 7 others with still higher and more exalted titles of nobility. The moment he reached him, the Chaubainha threw himself down at his feet, and he lay there, prostrate on the ground, as though in a state of shock, unable to utter a word. At this point the Rolim of Mune, who had been by his side all the while, spoke on his behalf, in his capacity as priest. "Sire," he said, "this is indeed a sight to move thy heart to pity, despite the nature of the crime. and bear in mind that the service that is most pleasing to God, and to which he is most inclined to show mercy, is the one that thou art now called upon to perform. For, by showing clemency in this instance, thou wilt be imitating him, as everyone wishes thee to do, with all their hearts, though the desire remains unspoken. And thou mayest believe for certain that God will be so grateful to thee for this, that when he gazes upon thee in the hour of thy death, he will reach out his mighty hand upon thy head, and absolve thee of all blame. After this he said many other things, which moved the king to pardon him freely, and he made him a promise to do so. At this the Rolim of Munay and all the other lords present showed great pleasure, and praised him highly for it, thinking that he would do as he had promised there in the presence of all. Since it was close to nightfall by then, he dismissed them. And the poor Chabayinha was handed over to a Burmese captain called Zemin Kumadai, while his wife and children, together with all the other women, were placed in the care of the Zemim and Seda, because he had his wife there with him and was an honorable old man whom the Burmese king trusted implicitly. Wow. So interesting. You can only imagine something like that. And these people are like pure, they're not crying for like a pop star. They're crying for like someone who, like a leader, a politician for them who means far more to them than any politician ever has in any of our lifetime. We can't even fathom this because our politicians are such garbage and have always been, except for maybe one. But this, this is a whole nother world that is exposed in this beautiful story. I also find it kind of funny how this guy remembers all these people's names, and these names are ridiculous. Like, I could meet like 10 people coming into the gallery, and I'd remember maybe one of their names if I can get them all. But I never forget a face. But back in the day, just memory, everything was just there, so much more. There was probably no electro-radiation poisoning our thought process, no chemicals being dumped into the mind, and the pineal glands were pure. I can just imagine these worlds, and that's why they were capable of creating such art, creating such moments, creating such thought processes, and following through with them, not being distracted by petty things like in the modern era. Like, they had everything right in time, their emotions, everything was running in ways that it barely does anymore for people, because there's just pollution of chemicals in all the bloodstreams. It doesn't seem like it then. And it's amazing to imagine this world free of the useless propaganda and mental trash that we in this 2020-21 are exposed to at all times. I think that's why I love these tales so much, is because they take back to a time that just seems so perfect and pure. And I hope you all see that as well. I do firmly and always have believed that we can bring it back to a state of renaissance like this. We can eradicate all the garbage and bring purity back to the world. I know we can do it. Bless you all.